Denancio, ask Gwelads and Gwelu.
All right.
and they will assist.
Oh, and then. Bring my substitute again.
Okay, hold on. Let me check their live stream, and then we're gonna start in just a minute. Right. Buenas and half a day. Todos amzu. Buena hudzung estigi un otruna episode Fanachu. This is another episode of Fanachu. Guahui host Midzu Tatlo si Michael Lujan Bavakwa. I am once again your host. And we have a very special episode up today. We have Felix Sablan with us, Felix Concepcion Sablan, Tautau Santarita, who will be joining us here today. He's got a lot to talk about in terms of the work that he has been doing in the diaspora, empowering Chamorros, making connections to Pacific Islanders, Asian Pacific Islanders, a lot of people who share similar histories, cultural similarities, and then backgrounds across the United States. And so we're very excited to talk to him. But before we get into that, though, I wanted to, what's it called? Before we get to him, he's right there. We'll get to him in a second. And I know he gave Donklu na sinahinya, his big sinahi. He is the Magalahi in the room with that big sinahi over there. But before we get to that, though, I wanted to remind everyone that Fanachu is made possible by all of you who watch, who listen, and especially those of you who support on Patreon, who sign up as patrons on Patreon, who make all of this possible. There are 8 people who are given stipends every month to create content for Fanachu, whether it's highlight videos, audio engineering for streaming podcast episodes. There's Half a Day with Annie Faye, who has done wonderful stuff in terms of bringing queer and Famalawan voices into the podcast. Her last episode she produced with Mama Chai, the Zoamti, and her apprentices, Vanessa Dueñas, and her granddaughter. And so all of the stuff that you do in terms of your support makes that possible. But I wanted to share, so just a reminder, for those of you who don't just want to support Fanachu by watching or liking, subscribing, and all that stuff, we do have Fanachu fundraiser shirts that are available for sale at the Nestina Design. This design comes courtesy of my brother, who did the design completely for free. Tsetlutz and Sensuli now, it's just Tsetlutz and Sensuli. And so it's a simple design, white t-shirt, teal letters, Fanachu with the moon up ahead. Chamorros have been guided by the moon for thousands of years. And then a cute little sakman down there, because the sakman takes us places. We continue to travel across long distances today. What's it called? And the sakman remains a symbol of how we have traveled and how we have so many journeys left to go. And so if you are interested in purchasing a t-shirt, message us on any of our social media, reach out. If you are a patron on Patreon, they are just $10. If you are a non-patron, then they are $20 each. And if you are a patron on Patreon, then shipping is free for you as well for your shirts. And so Sidzus Masi, we've already sent out a few dozen of them to supporters and patrons. And so we still have some more. So, if you want to give the gift of Fanachu to your family, your friends, your enemies, great for the, for your Takmas night. Just get them a nice Fanachu t-shirt. You can tell them that Miguel said it was a great gift for them.
Well, see Nefa Malik right there.
I'm so glad to have with me here Felix. He is what's it called? He recently was on island, and I had the honor of taking him and his sister, who I went to UOG with, through the exhibit at the Guam Museum. And it was great to catch up because we hadn't seen each other in a few years. He has been doing great work in terms of in terms of making those connections and really just giving the little nudges or the big nudges for our people in terms of sort of advancing and progressing. He is part of the, I know it's called UPAC, Union of Pacific Islander
Communities. Yeah. Union of Pan-Asian Communities. Yeah.
Hungan.
Yeah.
Pan-Asian Communities, and then he is also on the Mayor of San Diego's Pacific Islander Advisory Board. And so we're going to learn about what he's been doing, learn a little bit about his family as well. But Sidus Masi Felix for joining. Buenas and hafadeng.
Buenas, saludos and hafadeng to the sound. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hungan. And so what we're going to focus on a lot today is, of course, your work out there, Gisan Lago. But can you take us back to sort of, growing up on Guam, and then what sort of brought you out to the States?
Yeah, so nice to meet everybody. Gos Felix Sablan, Tato Santa Rita, y Tato Familia Kaila, y defunto Felix Sablan, Familia Kaila de Neba, y Nanalhu, si Josephine Cruz Sablan, Tata Sanahanya, Familia Kokora. I have been on Guam. I try to go as often as I can, but went to in Asen. This is I was going to Asen Beach at my 18th birthday, trying to contemplate my future, and decided I wanted to make something of myself. Didn't know what I was going to do, but well, my mom and dad were both people of intense action, and so one thing I always admired about my parents is that they didn't push heavily on school or career per se, but they said to find what I'm passionate about and find my purpose. And if a degree is required or whatever that is in between that, then that's when it becomes a mandate. And so I decided to come out here. Before that, I was a graduate of Southern High, first graduate class of Southern High. That was when in Alahan, High and Ocean View kind of merged together. Very proud of that class, and we still get together very often. But growing up in Guam, in Santa Rita, Berdalio subdivision is where I grew up. The Truman Elementary. Those were good yard skills going into playing and getting all dirty. And then went to St. Francis Middle in Antonia. Those are wonderful years as well. And then, of course, found my way at Ocean View, then Southern High. But what brought me up to the States was a calling, really, about really understanding, who do I want to be? And I knew that I wanted to stretch myself. And the interesting story was that my mom, as soon as I told her, I think, Mom, I want to try it out there. I want to go out and, make something of myself. In 2 weeks, she gave me a ticket one way. So I didn't really have much of a choice. All of my friends were like, what's going on? Well, we got, went to San Diego. This is the only place I've lived, back in the late 90s. I'm not going to give you the specific date. I want you guys to guess, but and stayed with a couple of relatives. My mom's oldest brother's out here, and my dad's oldest brother is out here, and was trying to figure myself out there. So Miguel, I'm not sure if you want me to continue going, but
no, these connections are important because we wonder why Chamorros, for a lot of groups there's always migration one direction, right? People move from one place to another, but because of these connections we always see Chamorros moving back and forth, right? Because you've got family out there, you have family out here and stuff like that. So no, these I think these connections are important. And so but what was it like when you came out to San Diego? Because it's always funny, because sometimes we have people for the longest time, Chamorros on island always thought Ayade, the United States, the land of milk and honey, the land of plenty. You know, it's so easy. You know, you just kind of show up off a plane and somebody hands you a high-paying job. You know, and every there it's raining Costco cards, it's raining Best Buy gift certificates, right? And so the reality is, as you experienced, of course, are very different. And so why don't you talk about that in terms of when you came out to the States, and then sort of the realities that Chamorros and other islanders face in terms of getting ahead.
Yeah, it was tough. There's no lie. The transition, it was a challenge for me, you know, coming from a tight-knit, interdependent community like our culture to an independent party of one. You learn pretty quickly that many cultural norms or island norms that we grew up with are definitely not the norm stateside. Yeah, that's the first. I think the second part is it's not given. You know, it's definitely something that you need to really be thoughtful about. I remember one of my first jobs out here, I was a cashier at a Maxi Mart. It was like a gas station convenience store, and I didn't have a car, right? And so I had to figure out get transportation. It was around 25 minutes. Yes, it's good, at least 30 minutes one way. It's not it's a far drive no matter where you go, right? You can't just walk. And I remember having to make the decision, like, if I'm going to get a car to actually get a better job or to kind of keep progressing, I need to figure out how to save money, right? And so I went to McDonald's and got, at the time they were doing a promotion of 10-cent cheeseburgers, and I stocked up 60 cheeseburgers that I put into the employee refrigerator. And I didn't want to touch any of my paycheck until I got $1,500 to buy a car, and I had a wad of cash going to get my license transferred from Guam to California, and I saw a car that I wanted, which was, for much more, it was like $4,000 was an 84 hatchback Mustang, nice Pirelli tires. It was a pretty good hot rod, and I was excited about it, but it was for sale. And so I waited out there for hours for the guy to come out to talk to. And I said, "Hey, I only have $1,500. Here's all the cash, right?" And he was asking for $3,000, and I had to negotiate. I can't. I want this car. This is my car. So he succumbed, and we made a deal, and I had to drop him off to wherever his house was, and I had my car. But it comes with a lot of sacrifice. I think that's the it's definitely not given to you. I didn't even have the only thing I really had that was important to me was a gym membership because I kind of wanted to stay kind of fit, which might be a little bit lopsided priorities, but I think the other thing too that people don't know when you come out here is there's a high percentage of people that come out here from our islands have a hard time really kind of getting that community. San Diego has one of the most well-established Chamorro communities and organized Chamorro communities in the country. And so, but I didn't know about that. It wasn't like an orientation or something. You just kind of fall into that. So there's a lot of resources here now that it was before. And a lot of community support and cultural sharing that could be essentially immediately seen when it wasn't before.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And when you were mentioning sort of your frozen cheeseburger diet, it made me think you totally could have made, you remember that documentary Super Size Me, where the guy ate McDonald's every day totally do something like that on Guam. It's just empanada. I mean, every day all you eat is empanada at mom and pop stores. That's the only thing you can eat for an entire month. But anyway, it's expensive. So, but I think I really like what you're mentioning there, because I think a lot of people in the islands outside, because for me it's so important that Chamorros on both sides of the Pacific, whether you are in the United States or elsewhere, whether you're in the Marianas, we just learn to see each other better in terms of what we face, what we have to offer, and we rely less on our assumptions about these people have all of these things that we
Right.
don't, or these people have it so easy compared to us, and so on. And so even just what you said there about how, sometimes if you go to out into the States, there may be more jobs, but you run the risk of having less family support, a much smaller or non-existent support network, right? But in the islands, there may be less open opportunities for jobs, but there's also more potential for people that you can rely on and get help from, right? And so that's an important thing to remember, is that it's not that one side or the other has the golden empanada ticket or something like that, and they all have it much easier. They have it way better. We got to learn to see each other.
Right. I'll add some what we're seeing in 2014. I was part of the Pacific Islander Caucus that did the first desegregation data report, as far as kind of what we can pull. We pulled college data, whatever we could find, because there wasn't that much data or questions that actually drew out some of those kind of ethnic biomarkers to kind of get some data to dissect. And what we found in that one, and I know it's changed and kind of evolved since the 2020 census, is that 56, give or take, % of Pacific Islander communities live below the poverty line out here in the mainland. And that was a shocking number, right? Because you would think that with the big network that we have, would be, we'd actually have a little bit more of a easier time getting resources. The fact is that most resources aren't used. There's not a lot of resource. It's not organized enough to actually maximize some of those grants and programs. And then the other thing that came out of that report that I thought was pretty telltale, to kind of share a little bit more context to the initial question, is that on average, about 4 families are living sometimes under one household just to survive. Just because of the cost of living, especially in San Diego and places kind of on the coast. It's a lot to kind of keep up. And so, and then the last part, which I think is another thing, most of our people come out here for college. I know I did, to come out here to kind of pursue your education, and the drop rates from people first quarter drop rates are like 70%. Part of it is because that network isn't there, that economic infrastructure is not there. So all of that is kind of painting a picture of the grass isn't greener on the other side.
No, thank you for that. Thank you. And you're bringing up the issue of data and Pacific Islanders, and so I think this is an important thing for us to think about, because when I first met you, when I went out to San Diego, I remember telling you that until I went out to San Diego for grad school, I really didn't use Pacific Islander very often. And so I think even nowadays in the islands, Pacific Islander, is it, when you hear that term, sometimes it's like, oh, is it time for another census? Because that's when you hear it. But can you tell us a little bit more in terms of Pacific Islanders in the United States, right? Because that's how, in terms of ethnicity, social data, right, is that Chamorros fall under Pacific Islanders. Right. And so can you just share a little bit more about that? And you can speak more broadly, or you can speak specifically in California.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that there are more SMEs or subject matter experts that have kind of a deeper knowledge on kind of how that gets sliced. And so I just want to recognize that I'm an N of one here, but there's, when you look at the Pacific Islander, there's even more nuances to that, because there's Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, which I think it was the last 10, 15 years they've separated that to kind of have some distinguishment as far as some of those specific needs related to the Native Hawaiian community. But you're right, it's a one big boiling pot. I think the most recent census was somewhere between 1.6 million, Pacific Islanders in that bucket. Chamorros have kind of always been somewhere in the top three. Of course, Native Hawaiian, Samoan, and then Chamorros. In San Diego, that it's a pretty big community. I think San Diego or California in general, but San Diego particularly is a big grouping. The Pacific Islanders is an interesting name because even that has some interesting nuances to it. So what constitutes a Pacific Islander? And that's an important distinguishment, as at least how we see it out here, is any person from or indigenous to, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, right? Those are the three kind of qualifiers. But there's a lot of shared history even across the Asia Pacific too, right? It's like Okinawans have the same kind of, like, so if you look at cultural nuances, if you look at the Philippines, there's always this dichotomy of, we live on an island. There's some shared kind of cultural relevance here, and we share kind of a colonial history. All that is very similar, and so why not? Right. And so I think there's this appetite to kind of bridge all that together, and instead of it our Asian brothers and sisters is what we like to call it. They are a huge resource to amplifying our voices out here. And as a matter of fact, they also have probably the most we leverage their work in the community and their economic, prosperity in a lot of the kind of community work that we do, which came out of that 2014 Communities of Contrast report, which is funded by our Asian brothers and sisters. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot to be said there. That's it. Good. Amen. Wow, you're good. But so I think at the point of like this report, even though it was, I knocked on every door of this building behind me. I knocked on all the doors, and no one gave a crap. I hate to say it that way, but it's the way it's so. The narrative was, give us the data to prove that we need a better policy, or we need to make sure that we understand these different contrasts to these communities. And once we got it, we went there and actually delivered it personally to every single door, every representative. And because we weren't a voting populace or enough to swing a vote, it was deprioritized. So that obviously got me really upset. So and that kind of turned kind of positive energy. That negative energy turned into positive energy when we created Islander Elevation, which is a community-based organization that I founded about 9 years ago. Because at the end of the day, if we're not voting, if we're not getting counted, we really don't have a say. And my mom told me, don't sit down and take it. So anyway, that's kind of the evolution of that. But back to your question, as far as like, there's a whole lot of turmoil underneath that name and that umbrella. It also waters down the 22 communities that are thriving, almost 200 to 300%. Some of our communities out here in the States, Pacific Islander communities, are growing really fast. Obviously, they have smaller numbers, but we're one of the fastest growing segments, minority communities in the country, and that has power if we organize.
That's such a good point, Maule ka no na punto, because you're what you mentioned about how you knock on doors. We're from the islands, we need help. Like, and then people look at you and say, how many votes do you have? How many of you are there? Why is this my problem, right? And so I think it's such an important thing what you said there, that you have to be organized.
Right.
That you can't expect, and I think for many islanders, especially those of us that we have more of a colonial relationship to the United States, there is this feeling of dependency, right? So kind of somebody's going to take care of it for me, somebody's going to handle it. But the truth of the matter, as you said, is that if you're so small in terms of simple the metrics of what matters in Washington, D.C. or in your state government house, then don't expect somebody to care for your particular needs, right? I mean, this is why when people say, when we have an issue in the Marianas and somebody says, what we need to do is we need to reach out to the Chamorros in the diaspora, and we need to get them to contact their senators or get them to contact their representatives so that they can take up this issue. I always say, that if you just kind of have people do that, it doesn't really matter, because you may have one, you got one Chamorro in Wyoming who contacts their senators, and their senators are like, what's a Chamorro?
Right.
What is that? Sounds tasty. Is this an ethnic food?
Right.
I have no idea. And then because you only have some places where Chamorros have become embedded enough, integrated enough into the politics of it, right? Where they have visibility, where there's structure, right? So where the political apparatus has to kind of meet their needs or see them, right? Like San Diego is a perfect example of that. Because, San Diego, a Chamorro restaurant opens up, you might have a council person show up, or you might even have a representative, a member of Congress show up and cut the ribbon, right? You get red ribbons, you got red rice too, I hear. How exciting, and so it's we're so scattered and diffuse. But if you organize, as you were saying, if you sort of gather and put and sort of become in solidarity with others, but also organize your community, then you can have a greater impact than your numbers alone.
Yeah, and it's also acknowledging that community, the communities that are that are part of the API umbrella, have gone through their journey too, and they've learned a couple of things here and there about how to make movement, how to really move the needle, how to turn the neck that or influence the neck that turns the head, right? And I think that's the strategy behind it. But I'd be remiss though, because I think that kind of calls out to paying homage, right? We look at, and I can speak to everybody, but I know that we community leaders out here, that there's plentiful, right? Which is wonderful to see a great group of people that are really passionate about creating access and advocacy for our communities. But we have to give them, our Asian brothers and sisters, our Asian cousins is what we call it, they've always opened the doors to us. They've always opened resources to us, and that's kind of helped our community along. in our community now, there's a lot of trailblazers that I have to mention for myself, because it's I'm speaking on behalf of a path that has set before me, right? And I'm hoping to kind of engage others as well. So Auntie Lola, Lola Sablan Santos. She was the one that brought me into advocacy. Like, she was the first person to say, you need to be activated. And she was a CEO of the GCN, the Guam Communications Network, that really kind of helped bring awareness of some of the elements or the things that we're dealing with in our community, provided scholarships for, doctor. I think maybe you've been a part of that benefactor of that as well. And she brought me into the fold and kind of taught me what she's learned, how long it took to get Chamorro as a ethnic option on a form, a government form, right? 30 years, almost 30 years, whatever that is. It's a long battle. Tana Lapule, I'm not sure you've heard of him. our Samoan brother out here that that's always reaching out to all, so that we have representation across all the different Islander communities that live here. If it weren't for a lot of these leaders, we wouldn't be as far as we are now. Really connecting the dots and making sure that our stories being told, which I think is the biggest problem. And this is kind of connecting to the story about how I landed in the mayor's council, which is an interesting story. Do you mind if I go into there real quick?
Por favor.
So I was really excited to see this, right? Because I kind of went off and not did any boards because then I got bulahaw grasha. I got lots of patkun trust na patkun. They're small, right? And so I had to kind of stop my community involvement, or at least the boards or the community advisories that I'm on, to focus on raising my family. And I was really excited to see that the Mayor Gloria here in San Diego had assembled the first API advisory council to really help make sure that that we're representing the communities that are in San Diego proper, or San Diego. It was really nice to see that we actually had that effort being pushed out. And so I remember once it's been announced, I looked into the website, and all I saw was all of our Asian cousins. Right? There was no one representing the Pacific Islander community. And what got me triggered is that how can someone else share our story? Or what's the mechanism by which they're going to get that story and bring that into the conversation onto the table? Because if we're not on the table, we're on the menu, right? And so I reached out to the people that were on this board and said, "Hey, this is not right. This is not right. There's plenty people from the Chamorro community, Samoan community, Hawaiian community. We even have a pretty good, Kosraean community here. I mean, there's plenty of people that could bring you into the struggles of these communities that would be happy to sit on this board." They completely agreed, and this is again kudos to the administration, because they understand. I think it was more, there wasn't a proactive reach out to these communities, because we're not, even though we're organized, not everyone in our community wants to kind of go out there and actually do the at that level of I guess politics. I don't want to do politics. I don't want that, and I get that, but not at the expense of not being heard, or at the expense of the 56,000 Chamorros that are in California, or in the San Diego area, to not have a voice at the table. And so when I said that, we expanded that board to now have we have Tongan, Chamorro, Samoan, Hawaiian, and I'm sure that there was others kind of speaking to this, which I think is great, but it took speaking up to say, hey, we can tell our own story, we can share our own struggles, and we can advise where the policies and legislation fall short in really making impact in our community.
Oh, and for those of you watching, we've got a few comments and we've got a few questions, but por favor, remember, if you'd like to ask Felix a question, maybe you want to ask him which is his favorite Johnny Sablan song, maybe you want to ask him, is he the Kelaguen Manuk, or is he the Kelaguen Uhang, or the Kelaguen Gamsun? I don't know. But if whatever you want to ask, por favor, pegahagi comments, put it into the comments. I do want to, you were talking about telling our story, and earlier this year, you were part of the Manautau San Lago series from the Guam Pacific Daily News and Manny Crisostomo. And so here, I wanted to share it here. And so I'll put the link for people who would like to check out the article. And it's a really nice piece highlighting some of what you've talked about and other sort of groups that you've been a part of. I mean, even talking about simple workforce development for Chamorros, stuff like that is very, very important because there's but so how did you this series has been very important in terms of giving voice to so many Chamorros that have been doing great work out there. And so what was it like to be sort of a part of this project, to have your story told in this way?
Yeah, I'll tell you, before this, I don't think my mom and dad and my family even knew a portion of this, which Manny did a good job at kind of pulling some of those experiences out. And I appreciate him. I think he's doing some wonderful work. It was emotional because you don't really get to look back and go, man, where what was my path like, and at this point you're just kind of chugging along. You're not trying to reflect on kind of where you've been and what you've gone through. You just kind of keep chugging, right? And he forced that for me to reflect a little deeper. And one of the things that he pulled out, which was I had a really hard stint. It was a stint of time between places that I was living, and my stubbornness, I didn't want to ask for help because to me it was important that I figured it out, right? My father, man, his story, how could I complain? My mother, my parents have gone through a lot, and how could I complain when it's just me, right? And so I found myself homeless under a bridge, right? And I was actually in that 84 hatchback Mustang with all of my stuff packed in, right? Because I fell kind of a space in between the two living situations. And I was, at the time I was at a retail store. I was running a retail store up in Kearney Mesa. And I remember always being the first person in the office and the last one to leave. And I would use that gym membership I spoke about, as a place to shower and wash my uniform in the sink. And I did that until I got myself back up and running. But what it did was it forced me to reflect on what is my voice, what is my life about. And it was there when I got a lot of clarity. And now, not only did I get a lot of clarity, I also got a different viewpoint of San Diego's homeless and maybe why drugs are being used. And what I learned was that the reason why it's not, I always thought that, and these people are druggies, they don't they just, that's why they're there. And what I found out was, hey, just like I was fearful that I was going to be robbed, killed, or raped, they're thinking the same thing without that car. And so for them those drugs, the drugs that they're using to stay up, is really to make sure that they don't fall into those three categories. And that was a good awakening. But it made me appreciate. So that made the talking to Manny made me appreciate kind of that maybe that story needed to be told. And Lanya, my family was like, what the hell? You didn't even tell me you're going through that. I could have sent you money. And I go, no, I wanted it to be for myself. I wanted it to be something that I got through. And I'm glad I did.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing that again. I wanted to, Muñeca de Oro she's got some lightning round questions for you.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so she says, favorite Chamorro dish?
Geez. Shit, that's good. I mean, I can eat kado all day. Couldn't
All
pick
right, Maulik. Okay. What dish do you skip on the fiesta table?
Oh man, Gula Suni. I know that's sacrilegious, but
No, it's okay. That's why that yeah, it's not the most mangi, but imas maulik
mm,
itauto. It's the best for us, even if sometimes it's not
yeah,
the imas mangi hungan.
yeah.
All right. What is your favorite Chamorro artist or singer?
I'm a little bit of obligated here. Just I would say Casey Lungaro.
Okay, Biba. All
Casey.
right. What is one way that you honor your ancestors?
Ooh. Um, I do it every single time I have the opportunity in a large forum to speak our language, to either try to address people in our native tongue, because to me that's the most way we can bring relevance to our culture and homage and respect to all of their elders before us. Now, and of course, I still ask permission to go to the bathroom.
And so Monieka has another question. This one's a bigger one, but it's an important one.
Yeah.
And so she says, what are ways that you have seen Chamorros in the States and the diaspora support causes or movements back home? That's the first part. And then and actually another person actually messaged and asked, I don't know if this person currently or used to work at Southern High School. They said, any chance that Southern alumni can develop a project to help the school back home?
I would love to be a part of that. So I'll start from that one. I mean, if I don't know who's the principal now, but when I was in high school, it was Mr. Diego. I still remember him with his hands on his shoulders going, boys, get to class, boys. I guess we're always the one never going to class. So no, it was Diego. Mr. Diego was for Ocean View, not for Southern High. Now I'm forgetting. So how to activate us? A lot of people on Guam are here out here in the diaspora really care about what's happening on our island. There's a kind of there's a mahaling where really like there's a craving for staying connected to the issues that are important. And I think it just requires activation, really. So that's the first thing I'll say. I think there's motivation for when it comes down to, what can we do out here? And I know in the past, some of our representatives, Madeline or even Mike, St. Nicholas at one point, kind of try to engage the community here. And I know that there's an appetite for it. We just have to figure out how to make that more of a streamlined communication about what those needs are. I think there's also a fine line, right? Because even me, as someone who's kind of haven't been on island or not a resident on island, going back to Guam, I also got to make sure that I respect that, hey, I may be out of touch as well about what those issues are. And so there's a little bit of a respect of kind of making sure that we're not kind of trying to push an agenda, not even knowing kind of how that, not being a resident there. There's a saying, actually, one of my good friends, Shin, Shin Tiara. It's a unique thing to see at the Guam Club out here, or the Guam Club or the Chamorro communities out here. When someone leaves, let's say in the 70s, they come out here, and someone leaves in the 90s, and someone leaves in the 2000s or whatever, they all have different kind of cultural understandings of where Guam was at, and it kind of gets frozen in place, right? And so there's even diversity in how people have experienced Guam in our own community. And because of that, there's different opinions, right? And so I think, I think that there's a way to kind of bring that all together, and we care. I would even argue to say that the percentage of people that have either KOEM or PDN on their app as a feed is probably higher than you think. So, so activate us.
No, Sidus Masi for that. I mean, I think that this is a question that, always comes up for me, because you've been talking about the census, and the previous censuses had shown the trend, the reality, which is, that sort of, there are far fewer Chamorros in the islands now than in the diaspora. There was a time when it was closer. Now it shows sort of that, that there's a fraction that are leaving the islands, but it's also just sort of that, Chamorros outside in the diaspora are having families, they're growing their communities and stuff like that too. And so that's why for me, and I think this is this is one of the reasons why this podcast exists too, is sort of that for me, I as somebody who lived in California, lived in the Marianas sort of, and has seen both sides of it, right? Just sort of needing to recognize that this is the reality for the people now, is that we're not sort of a people who just sort of live out in Las Vegas or Arizona. We're not just people who live in the Marianas. We're people that are spread across this ocean, and we can kind of judge each other. We can look down on each other. We can idealize each other. We can say, oh my goodness, you guys in the islands have it so great. You guys over there have it so great, in Texas and California, whatever. Or we can try to understand where we're at right now and find those ways to work together. And so, so that's why, for example, my free weekly Chamorro classes in Zoom, now I used to have them in coffee shops here. In the pandemic, I opened it up so anyone could attend. And now it's hundreds of people in the diaspora who attend. And some of them say I should, some of them say, oh, you should charge for this. And I'm like, no, I don't want money. This is my tsinsuli. What is your tsinsuli back for the islands? So right. I give this, I give this like back in the old days, right? Your roof falls apart. The thatch on your roof falls apart. You need some help. I'm going to help you. But that's my tsinsuli for you. Right. What's your tsinsuli back though? So that's why this podcast has grown primarily because of people in the diaspora and some in the islands, but in the diaspora who wanting a way to kind of support stories of Chamorros sort of stuff back home. And then and so we definitely need more things like that, where it's not one side or the other, but it's kind of like, what is the relationship? What's the relationship that we can form across the ocean?
Yeah, I love that has so much, there's so much richness to that. And I always try to say, it is a mystery. I'll relate it to it, but it's still a mystery as to, what were the true intentions of our ancestors when they set out to, to settle the most remote parts of Oceania, right? But I'd like to think, in that spirit of what you just said, I'd like to think that there was a responsibility to share our ways, right? I believe that that same spirit exists in all of our people today, no matter where they're at. But instead of new islands that we essentially inhabit and spread, it's new communities that we find ourselves in. And how do we share that? It's a common story that needs to be shared, and I think we can align on the story, not on the nuances of haves and have-nots. So if we just focus on telling our story, because here's the reality of it. We're still understanding our people, who we are, our history. It just keeps getting, deeper and deeper, and we're learning more as we go. And that's a beautiful process, right? As we kind of peel each one of those onion layers back. But we can still find ourselves linked in that storytelling, which I think should be the focus.
No, Hungen. And I wanted to give you one chance here to tell another story, a story from your family, because you've been, and this is very, very important, especially for all people, right? Is that the stories we tell, but especially for those who have left the islands, where it feels like the things that that are tomorrow, whether it's the language or the culture or the lands, right, that they're far away, right? So this is why these stories are so important. You know, it's when you're sweating here in the islands, it's a little bit easier to feel tomorrow. If you're, you know, if you're buried under a snowman or something in Vermont, Bentimas Makput, it might be a little bit harder, right? And so, but your family, especially for your father, you know, who was a pioneer, a Chamorro pioneer in his own way. And I wanted to show a little clip because you know, he passed earlier this year, but he was recognized and he was honored as the first Chamorro to be a federal fire chief.
First Chamorro to be both a federal fire chief for federal, and then also for the government of Guam, to do both.
And so let me share a little clip from KUAM News first, and then I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about Sito Tomo.
Okay.
Dispensa Nengon Rakto Estiging. Here it is. Oh shoot. Okay, Nengon Rakto. There we go.
Former Guam resident Felix Concepcion Sablan passed away in August of this year, but recently family, friends, members from the local and federal fire agencies, and island leaders gathered at the Guam Congress Building in Hagåtña to posthumously honor and recognize Sablan for his years of dedicated service. You see, Sablan was not only the fire chief for Navy Federal Fire, but also the Guam Fire Department, and he is the first Chamorro to do so. During the ceremony, Sablan's son, Felix Jr., spoke on behalf of the family, sharing some of his father's leadership lessons.
A leader without followers is just a person taking a walk. My father knew that nothing meaningful and lasting gets accomplished alone, and that a leader should strive to be the type of person that deserved the responsibility given.
Sablan served as a fire chief for 10 years before retiring from Navy Federal Fire in 2000. By then, he had put in 21 years of dedicated service. Then in 2002, he was appointed GFD Fire Chief, where he served another 2 years.
My father was an extraordinary man. He taught us to treat people with dignity and respect, regardless of their pedigree or title.
Sablan extends his gratitude and appreciation.
For all the stories about my father, just sharing stories, it's really helped our family a lot. I want to thank all of our friends and family that are here, that were present and supportive.
Felix Jr. also wanted to extend a huge thank you to the legislature, the administration, and the federal and local fire department for bestowing such a recognition in a meaningful ceremony. Installation Fire Chief Gifton Lawrence of Naval Base Guam.
Throughout the day and night, each alarm was sounded by a bell, which called him to duty and to place his life in jeopardy for the good of his fellow man. And when the call had ended and the alarm was completed, it was the bell that rang 3 times to signal the end. And now our brother, Fire Chief Felix Sablan, has completed his task, his duties well done.
Jonagan Charfris, KUM News.
Very moving. Put for butt.
Yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony, and my dad's life. Wow, you know, when he was born with infantile paralysis. He was paralyzed from the waist down the first 4 or 5 years of his life, and he was the main reason why I have a heart for community, heart for service. And so in those first formative years, he was crawling on the floor, and his elbows and his knees were like leather. They were just tough from just all the wear and tear. And my grandmother searched everywhere to find any kind of cure to help. She was relentless. So she found herself in front of a Sarahana, and the Sarahana worked with my dad to massage his his legs, and over a course of a year he was able to walk and run, and man, boy did he run. He didn't stop running. After that, he kind of a troublemaker. Growing up, he was he was a little bit more radical than most people remember, but he was getting into lots of fights, and so he got kicked out of all the schools on Guam, and he went up to Fairfield to finish out high school, right? And so there he came back to Guam after, when he was like maybe 19 or 20, right after high school. And he lived back in the Santa Rita home, and with his mom and dad, and that's when he went to the military, right? So he was in the Army, and served 4 years there, and was stationed up there in Korea, and so him and his brothers were also deployed as well. So he came back and met my mom. And he called him his sweetheart, is how he would call it. But he had a determination that kind of was transferred to all of us kids, to do what needed to be done, right? No matter what that was, and to not just treat people with respect and dignity, but to your responsibility is to help others, help your community, and that stuck. My mom she was the one that was, there's something that's wrong, you speak up, and if you don't speak up, you're no better than the person who's inflicting the pain, right? And so those two together really kind of catalyzed kind of who I am today, as far as how I look at the world. And man, do I owe a huge debt to my parents, my dad especially. We're still struggling to get through a lot of this. This is our first holiday without him, and now it's more about how do we continue to live fulfill his legacy. And Lanyard, I have his name, which is, it's even more pressure. Right? And my son has his name, so I'm excited to continue to do good work, to do what needs to be done, and make this world a better place, make our community have better access and support than before I came in. So all to my dad and my mom.
Again, Sidzus Masi. It's such an important reminder, that we are what we are is the stories that we remember, the stories that we tell. And so that's why, for Chamorro people, wherever you are, tell the stories of your ancestors, the ones that the ones that make you feel strength, the ones that make you feel connected to them, and just the way that you shared sort of how he inspired you. That's so important. That's so important. Wow. No, Sidzus Masi for coming and for sharing about your life, about your family, about the work that you have been doing. And I wanted to give you a chance, though, for people because people that have been watching have been commenting and wondering how can they learn more about these sorts of things. Sort of are there ways that people can get in touch with the orgs that you work for, or you on social media? And so just, do you have any final message or a sort of information that you can provide to people?
Yeah, I'd love to connect, and there's so many different avenues depending on what you're looking for. But reach out to me. I'm on Instagram, under Represent Guam, or on Facebook. So it should be under Felix Sablan. But if I could leave the people who are watching, either both on island or out here, take every opportunity to share our cultural values. Don't take that for granted. That opportunity only comes, and make it a practice. I have a belief that our unique 4,000 plus year old culture and our way of life, or the Inafat Maulik, is a value to the broader community. And so I encourage everyone to embrace our ancestral wisdom and let that infect the world. Again, I think that we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to the world to really kind of let our story come to life, and to kind of paint with a more intentional brush. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to hearing and seeing you all in different walks of life.
Biba Sidzus Masi Felix, and Sidzus Masi no Hamzu todos ni umeega padume ekungok estigi ifenapun. Otro na episode Fanachu. Adios. Este ki manali hit.
Adios, Ste.